would focus on your routine because there's going to be times that you're not going to feel like doing whatever it is that you're doing, although at first you might have been passionate. The other thing I've noticed as you get older, John, you don't have the same maybe energy that you did when you were younger. And also, what I've noticed is the older you get, you're not as resilient toward stuff that come up that are outside of your control. Yet, if you can put together a routine, then whatever it is that happens that morning when you wake up that might trip you up, if I can use that word, or might upset you, it doesn't matter. Yet if you have a to-do list and you are very routined on it, then it really doesn't matter what happened the day before, the morning before. Could have gotten into an argument with your wife, or your kids might have been difficult to deal with that morning as you're getting them off to school, yet you don't let it ruin your entire day. It's called mature. Right, John?
Yeah, that's amazing. Welcome to the New World Podcast, where we delve into the ever changing and accelerating pace of global change and its impact on our lives. I'm your host, John Paul Flores, broadcasting live from the New World Studio. Today, we're diving into the world of AI and automation. As an enthusiast and expert in lead generation, I will guide you through understanding and leveraging these technologies for your business and for your personal use. And don't forget, AI and automation might be unstoppable forces, but that doesn't mean you are powerless. Tune in to learn how to make them work for you and not the other way around. But first, let's meet our guest. Welcome to the New World Podcast, where we navigate the changing world around us. I'm your host, John Paul Flores, specializing in lead generation and AI automation, here to help you understand how our world is changing and what it means for you. Today, we're excited to host our remarkable guest who's a leading figure in sustainable investment and urban planning, which is fantastic. With a deep understanding of sustainable development and a knack for innovative solutions, our guest is at the forefront of driving positive change into the global investment landscape. Join us as we explore the insights and expertise of Reagan Rodriguez, a visionary in shaping a more sustainable future. Reagan, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. And you are calling in from, so that others know, what country are you at right now, John?
I'm actually from the Philippines.
That's right. So if I'm not mistaken, I know it's 1 p.m. Eastern time here in Miami. What time is it in the Philippines, John?
It's 12 hours ahead, it's 1 a.m.
Yeah, yeah, it is. So you're a real trooper getting on here at 1 in the morning. And I don't know if you knew this, but in the United States, today's technically, I guess, what the committee called they would refer to as a
Memorial
holiday.
Day.
It's Memorial Day, but hey, I'm still working, right? Hashtag I am Latino, right? We do have a strong work ethic. So go ahead. Let's kind
That's
of get
amazing.
started.
Awesome. Well, by the way, I watched your video from 2 years ago and I saw that you are very
Yes.
active from then. And I saw one of your line that you said is visionaries attract the resources they need because they start with the end in mind. And that is an amazing quote. Do you mind letting us know what that means?
Yeah, I guess think of it as what is the objective of why you're wanting to start whatever initiative or cause that you're wanting to start. Uh, for example, some people might think right away in terms of profitability. Others might think in terms of what kind of growth am I going to experience through this process. Um, Others might realize who are others that are less fortunate than I am, and maybe the talents, the gifts that God's given me, I can then use those gifts to then help others that are less fortunate than I am. That's, I guess, the way I think in terms of what the end in mind is.
That's amazing. And before we delve into the more specific questions that I have, do you mind sharing with our audience who Reagan Rodriguez is, your expertise, what you're passionate about, and what keeps you busy these days?
Oh my goodness. I often have trouble with answering the question about what I'm passionate about. The answer could be nothing, and it could also be an abundance of things. Um, I think sometimes we can uh, be very passionate, yet we're not committed, right? I was talking with a friend of mine a few weeks ago, I should say, and it was a young guy, and he's in a kind of a new relationship, and he was mentioning to me, uh, well, I'm emotional. He said, isn't that what love is an emotion? And again, he called for advice, right? Just like you're asking me for advice. And I said, correction. Love is not an emotion. It's an action. Because after you've been married for a while, if you have been fortunate enough to be married, you'll notice that there are times you don't feel like loving the person, yet you take action on it. Uh, So I think the same is with a business. It's very easy to get emotional. It's also very easy to, when someone asks me a question like the one you asked me, for me to speak in haste and just go on and on about what I'm passionate about. So I'm going to answer the question by saying I'm passionate about my routine. I begin my morning a certain way. I um, check my emails. I get back to people. I'm more about being committed. About the first question you asked, what the end in mind is, more so than I am about whatever warm and fuzzies I think might happen.
That is an amazing answer to the question. And in a world where most
Well,
people and
because
companies as
sometimes they're
a
not going to
whole,
be. I'm sorry about that, John. I wouldn't say. I wanted to add there are going to be times we're not
oh,
going to
sure.
be as excited, right? We're not going to be as passionate. Yet, if we're operating under certain behaviors that we're going to do each day, then whatever it is that's going on around us, whatever noise, I like to refer to it that way, is going on around us, I'm really not concerned because I know what my daily activities are that I have to do. And I think that sometimes the people that uh, can be the most passionate and that serve the greatest causes. I'm thinking of nonprofits out there that provide clean water, yet they maybe don't have the same work ethic of somebody that may have a mundane, boring business that you think, well, that's not a cause that means something. Well, if you're providing jobs for people, if you are helping them with collecting a paycheck every week, and then they can then deposit that paycheck and then go to their local grocery store and buy food. And if that person, oh boy, am I gonna let people know how I really feel? If that person is a single mom who is of Hispanic descent, okay, and I can say that since I'm Latino, okay, it's not a stereotype. Chances are she's probably a single mom. And what is she going to do with that paycheck? So she might just, as someone say, cleaning homes or cleaning at a hotel. But when she gets that paycheck on Friday, she's then going to go to the local grocery store. She's going to buy food. She's going to place that food on their children's table. That is a humanitarian cause, right? It's helping those that
That
are less fortunate here in the United States, those that get discriminated against. And it's placing food on their children's table. And that child who is now educated in the United States and has the same education system as everybody else has the opportunity to become the next president of the United States.
That
Go
is
for it. I
an
am.
amazing answer.
Yeah. Go ahead, John.
And I think in a world where most people only think that a humanitarian is someone who helps a lot of people, they forget to just think a lot of people are helping themselves and helping their family. That is one of the best cause a person can have.
Yeah, you're right. I used to have a neighbor of mine that was a physician, and he thought that what he did when he went to work every day uh, helped people, and what other people did not. And I said, so tell me why you feel you help people. And he says, well, think about it. I've got so many patients that come in and see me. I'm uh, helping them with their, he means health wise or if they're sick. And then he said, but that one neighbor right over there, and he pointed, this guy had this really nice home, and he had a business where he cleaned carpets for a living. Okay, meaning he had a van, was himself, he advertised, and then would just clean carpets and had maybe a crew of a few people that worked for him. But at the end of the day, he cleaned the carpets in those homes. And he said, well, what is he doing? I said, are you serious? I said, and again, this was in an area in a part of the United States where people do have carpet. In South Florida, they don't. Yet in the Midwest, they do. They have basements, kind of family rooms, and there's carpet there. And I said, imagine three, four children sitting on the floor or playing on the floor or laying on the floor where it's on a carpet and they're watching TV and it's family time. I said, they're helping in that way. So, anyhow, let's go to the next one, John. I could go on and on about how what might not seem humanitarian can be if you place it in the right perspective as you work each day.
That's That's great. I appreciate the fact that you like to go and look at other people's shoes. So now let's go to the second question. In a world where
Sure.
most people focus on profits alone, especially even big companies focus on profits alone, I noticed that most of what you do leads back to sustainability and maybe not being entirely focused on profits. Is there a particular reason on why you like doing business that way?
I want to answer that question accurately. Are you specifically meaning asking why I take on projects that deal with alternative energy or sustainability? Or are you asking the question about where the mindset or attitude comes in of thinking more in terms of the cause and the impact versus profit? What specifically?
Yes, so I'm trying to focus on specifically the cause and impact.
I'm fortunate in the fact that I received a phone call one day from somebody that I met that knew someone else, kind of an acquaintance, and he had said to me, Reagan, we just got back from he and nine other billionaire families. These were people that are giving away their wealth. So these 10 kind of legacy families had all gotten together at a castle in Germany, and they formed this, if we could call it a foundation. And when they formed that, they then said, and who will find these causes for us? Who will then serve as kind of the underwriter? And the person that thought of this idea, he's a gentleman that's given away most of his wealth, is in billions he's given away. He said, I've got just the man for the job. And as soon as he landed in America, the first thing he did was, well, I don't know if it was the first thing, but he called me and I answered. And he said, Reagan, I just got back with nine other legacy families. He didn't refer to them as billionaires, and said, your name came up quite a bit. And he said, and here's what we're putting together. Um, what can you tell me? So it's more about the fact that the funds that I help manage, the foundation, the yield codes that I help manage, uh, we talked about as one of the first questions, what's the end in mind? Well, the end in mind was let's put together uh, alternative energy projects in developing countries, areas where they don't have power, they don't have clean water. I think that kind of answered that. We can go on to the next one, or else, like I said, you know me, I can go on and on.
That's amazing. And on your podcast episode, because I did watch some of your podcast episode, this one
Yeah.
titled Chaos and Contentment, you said the richest person is not the one who has the most, but someone who needs the least. If I'm not mistaken, that's the quote that you said. Can you explain
Yeah,
that?
I would love to, because it kind of goes back to the first question about begin with the end in mind, right? So, one of the things I did, and I want to be very careful that I'm not saying that this is what everyone has to do if you're seeing or watching this. I'm just, hey, the question is about me, right? What I did before I started my business was I uh, put a cap on my income, meaning I made a list of all the things I wanted. So at the time, I didn't have any money. And here's the other thing I realized. So, what I actually began with, and then we'll get to the end, was I knew that the God that we worship is a generous God. And he knows the desires of my heart. Okay. So I did put that I wanted a nice home. I wanted this type of car. I wanted this type. And so I made a list. I even made a list of even food, right? So at the time I was on what they refer to in the United States as a ramen noodle diet. These are these like noodles that cost like 93 cents. Have you ever seen them? They're in a package. You put them in hot water. Oh my goodness. They got a shelf life of like 2048 or something, right? And so I said to myself, I'd like to be able, and this is lavish. Are you ready? And say, I'd like to be able to spend 50,000 a year just on food, meaning going out and eating. I mean, so when you think about it, I'm going to pick a number. With $1 million a year salary, probably less than that. Let's just look at it about 500,000. You can have all those things that you want. You literally could go out to eat every day if you wanted to. I don't want that now, but if you really wanted to, you could do that and still spend 50, 60,000 a year on food. And it's very conservative if you're netting 500,000 a year or a million. The same with a home. You can still have a nice home. You can still have everything you want. So to answer the question, what I made a list of is all the things that I wanted. And I thought, is that really every, can you think of anything else? And then I realized I can have all of those things with this amount of money. And I thought anything above that, I'll just give to causes that, when I say are dear to my heart, things that kind of dislocate my heart. And then, you know what happens when you do that? As you get closer to that amount, you'll start lowering the bar, right? Of how much you need to make, which is the opposite of what you think would happen. You think you would do the opposite and say, well, maybe 1.2, maybe 1.5. But what actually happens is that you're now starting to see what takes place, the fruits of that giving. You're starting to see your seeds pop up. So what happens is you say, do I really need two cars? Do I really need a new Mercedes? Maybe I could buy a 2-year old, whatever, fill in the blank. Mercedes, Lexus, whatever. Uh, I think I kind of covered that. If you want to go to the next question, John.
Yeah, I'd like to go and talk more about that answer that you have, because some people, they say, I want to be rich, I want to have this much, but they don't necessarily know what they're gonna spend it to. But it's amazing that you actually had a breakdown on what you'll spend your money that you want to make too. So, is there a particular reason on why you did that, or do you think that made you want to do the work more?
Um, hmm. Maybe I'll just speak for me. Um, I, I know that I can uh, be a little greedy. Okay. I know that I tend to compare myself with other people. And when you do that, it never ends. And you're not going to win. You know what I mean? There's always someone that's going to have a bigger yacht, a bigger home. Um, I think I was number one. I was born. I'm going to say it differently. I was born with, I guess, two natures. One that I am uh, have a part of me that can be greedy. So in order to guard my heart against that, I put up a guardrail. Yet now it's just kind of in my heart. So I think the best way to answer the question is it's a process and you kind of grow through that. So I would just encourage somebody to be hooked on a good thing, right? Some people, we've all been hooked on alcohol. We can get hooked on drugs. We can get hooked on all types of addictions. Well, what about getting hooked on the addiction of generosity, of giving, which then can encourage others to do the same?
That's fantastic. I noticed that personally, most of the people around us we've talked to, or generally all people, they're addicted to something. They're all addicts, but they differentiate on what they get addicted to. I mean, 100% of them are addicts into something on some way.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. And another way to call it is it can be a habit, right? There's good habits and there's bad habits. You can have the habit of eating chocolate every day. And you don't have to, people say, oh, habits are bad. I'm going to break them. Or replace it. Replace eating chocolates with vegetables, right? Replace drinking vodka with water, right? So you just replace that habit.
I love that the way you answer questions are more on the philosophical level of things.
Okay, thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. Yeah.
That is a compliment. In a world where most people talk about details and strategies, what do we need to do? We need to do it this way or that way. It's refreshing to see someone who speaks from the heart.
Thank you. Thank you. We also have to be careful, just like anything, like when you said about addictions. Just because you said that, I have a friend, a young man that I mentor, and he's actually getting his PhD in philosophy. Oh my goodness. I don't think I would have been smart enough for that. Can you imagine? I mean, not a master, but a PhD in, of all things, philosophy. And the other day, he and I were getting together and he asked me, what are some happy moments that you've had? Can you think of a happy moment? Or then from there, it got to, well, why should I work? Right? He's got about, like, he's finished now with his PhD. He's got to do, or almost he finished for the year. He's working on his dissertation. And so I said, so what's going to come next? Right? What are you going to do next? And he said, well, in so many words, he was thinking, well, what's the point? right? It's almost like he overanalyzes and overthinks so much that he's like, what's the point of working after this? And I said, here's what I'd like you to imagine. Imagine if you buy your first home, and then on that home you throw a little bit of a housewarming party, right? Have you ever been to a housewarming party before, John? Yeah. So I said, imagine having that to kind of set as a goal and saying, gosh, it'll be fun when I have that housewarming party. I may only invite 8 to 10 people. It doesn't have to be that big, but that would be something fun. And he said to me, Reagan, it's interesting that you say that because that's something that we studied in our philosophy class. I said, what? Having a housewarming party? And he said, yeah. And he said, and you know what they taught us? That when you have a housewarming party, the only person that's truly happy for you is yourself. No one in that home is happy for you. You are the only one that is truly at the happiest about your own housewarming party. I said, now, so here's how I answered the question because he was basically saying, well, what's the point of doing that? Or he was saying, your uh, strategy that you gave me to have something to be motivated to. He says, at the end of the day, the only one that's going to be happy at that housewarming party is you. And here's how I answered the question. I said, if you go through all the great philosophers in life, the greatest of them, what was the one thing they all had in common? And he fell right into it. And he said, they all died miserable. I said, there you go. So if you want to put down my idea about having a housewarming party, congratulations. Go ahead and choose what are things that are desires in your heart. And again, God placed those in you. So let's not get that then we're no worse.
You know, in the Philippines, we have a term called pilosopo. So pilosopo. So it means somebody who, let's say you said a great news to them, instead of them being happy for you, they try to be cynics. They try to attack the idea or the great news that you had. Instead of being happy for you, they try to attack that. And yeah, I think that goes back to them. As you said, most of the philosophers die living a miserable life. I think instead of doing something, they just want to bring you down. And yeah, I hope the young man that you're speaking with doesn't go fall too deep into the well of philosophy to the point that he just asks the questions, what's the point of living? That's a scary question to ask yourself.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, John. Have you ever heard of the expression of or the about how you keep a crab in a bucket? Have you ever heard of this like a crab? Have you ever heard this before, John? It's very
I
difficult to
have
keep
not.
a crab. Assume you put it in a bucket and had something sealed, they could punch through that, right? If you put it in one of those like Folger kind of, and then they'll poke right through that. So then some people have thought of putting like a board over that bucket, and still with their claws they can get out. So they found there's one way to keep a crab in a bucket. You put two in there or a three, and they won't even make it. As soon as one of them puts the claw up, right, the other one will pull it down. So if you put three, they don't even make it that far. As soon as the claw starts, the other one pulls it down. The other one, so you don't even have to put a lid on the bucket, and you don't even have to supervise it, and they won't get out. And isn't that interesting? That's humans sometimes. Whenever you tell them this is something I want to accomplish, they'll be like that crab in a bucket. They don't want you getting out to have freedom. They want to pull you down.
I've never heard of that, but that is an amazing. I will keep that in mind. That's an amazing analogy. And yeah, let's go to the next questions before we go
Beautiful.
too deep into this one. Uh,
Yeah.
So I did see that you have some smart city projects. How do you approach integrating
Hmm.
alternative energy solutions into those?
I guess there's a need. I'm doing something in Uganda right now. 90% of the people don't have electric or power, so we're building a solar project there. From there, I was then referred to Tanzania. Tanzania is how they pronounce it. In America, they say Tanzania, and we're building an ethanol plant there. From there, I was then referred to a project in South Africa where it's going to be a waste to energy. We're taking trash, converting that to energy. So I don't know if that answered the question, other than the fact that uh, I'm networked with quite a bit of people in my specific industry, uh, and if it makes sense, I move forward with that cause. I'm very selective, I will say that, and I do turn down most of the deals. So yeah, you know, I don't know. Hope that answered the.
I don't know which person said this, but I heard some rich guy basically say most of the profits that we got is not from getting a lot of companies on board with us. It comes from turning most of the deals down.
Ooh, that's good.
And I guess, yeah, sure, please go ahead.
I'll answer that even best. The philosophy that we have with the yield co that I manage and this impact kind of foundation is that we've rather be in a bad deal with good people than a good deal with bad people.
That's very interesting. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Because I've been a part of good deals with bad people and it didn't work out.
Yeah, and it hurts your soul.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
very well said.
yeah. I mean, if there's a bad deal and you're working with some good people, I think you're gonna be 100 times more motivated to actually make that
To
amazing
figure
cause
things
work.
out. You're exactly right, my friend. Very well said.
And when you're in a deal with bad people, you're just looking for the way out, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you're right. The focus is usually about an exit strategy and how quickly they can just get rich so that they can then retire and sail off into the sunset, I guess.
I've never gotten the point that most people have about passive income, how they just want to, retire very young and not work anymore. Because I've tried that. I've tried not working for a month. It hurts, literally. Hurts.
It does. And I'm glad that you say that because I find pleasure from my work. And getting back to my philosophy is if you still have a pulse, a pulse, then you still have a purpose, right? So if God's kept you around and He's given you certain experiences, certain gifts, what a tragedy to say the last years of my life, I'm going to instead collect seashells on the beach when you could be doing so much more.
That's fantastic. And yeah, I noticed that most of the people who retired, these are the people who are maybe 55 years old. They've been in their job for over 2 decades. And once they stop working, they basically just slowly die like a plant, which
I
is
know.
sad.
I know. I've seen that too. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Go ahead, John. What else?
Awesome. And could you explain how, we saw that in the past few years, crypto or blockchain technology has risen in popularity. How has blockchain technology enhanced the transparency and efficiency in sustainable investment projects?
I don't know much about crypto, so I'm not here
Oh,
to talk about being an expert in that. What I do know about is blockchain technology. And what I appreciate about blockchain technology is that there's transparency on it. So, how has it helped us? It eliminates us from having to have audited financials. So, in a fund, that's sometimes the biggest expense, and it is needed for transparency reasons. However, we've seen over the years how it's not really as transparent as we think, although there's accountability to it. Look at what happened with Enron and the whole situation through Arthur Anderson. Even look at the situation with Bernie Madoff. That there's always other things that can kind of be done when there's that much money, and that's what I appreciate about blockchain technology is it's transparent. You can't you can't lie on it.
that's an amazing answer. And do you see as we advance more into the future, do you see more projects that just on a more global scale, not in your portfolio per se, but more on everyone? Do you see the world leading more to sustainability instead of just getting things done?
I tend to be an idealist, so I'm going to answer the question by saying yes. And I'm also going to answer the question by saying yes because people our age, my age, I should say, and those that are older, the other generation, we tend to put, right, I'm Gen X, and then the other generation, I'm saying older than mine are baby boomers. And for years, we put down the millennials and then now the Gen Z. And I think what is so popular right now in America is saying that that youngest generation right now is not one that we can change. So, being an idealist, I'm going to say that the generation that we cannot change is the generation that'll change the world.
That's very interesting because you can't necessarily mold them to your idea.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I
That's
think that's any of us, right? You're not going to mold me into your idea.
Yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, I see that a lot more different people are thinking on different terms. And more people on your age, I don't know what generation you're a part of. I see that most of them is leading towards green energy. And the last person that I have spoken with, I don't know if you viewed the video that I've showed you, he is leading more into, he just wants to have a simple life, move into the mountain, and build a self-sustaining home, which is amazing.
Yeah, it is.
A-
Uh-huh.
And given that AI, potentially can handle tasks of investment analysis and risk assessment, how can hedge fund managers or basically people who give advice on where to invest at differentiate their services and maintain a competitive edge in the sustainable investment sector?
Yeah, that's probably not an answer, a question I can answer. I'm just probably not the best person to answer that question. Um, I think there's probably people that are, I just, that's just not, I have no idea.
That's totally understandable. And one of the last questions that I do have is, what are the most common misconceptions about sustainable projects?
Um, well, that they take a long time before you make a profit. So, for example, a wind farm is very, very pricey. I don't know if you knew this, but just one wind turbine can cost about 1 million, 1.1. I've seen them as high as 1.3. It it takes a while before you reach profitability. I look at the initiative I'm doing with trees, and it's a long hold. So I think I'm going to answer your question by saying, from the way we do things, um, as set up as an impact foundation, they can deduct their taxes by giving to that cause. And then the following year, when there is profitability, or it might be 3 years from now, then those dividends that would go to those donors, then that would have to be taxed. So I think that's the misconception, is they don't understand how profitability can take place. It's maybe not as black and white as, say, investing in an existing business, or I don't know much about conventional type businesses. I really don't. So I'm just going to make something up. You know, those type of businesses where it's a store, like glass storefront, you then open it with your hand like this, right? The door, you walk in and they have some form of a product. You buy it, you go to the cashier, and that is all about a certain price, and then you sell it for more and you make a profit. That's something I know nothing about. So it's going to be different than what I know nothing about.
That's amazing. And doesn't most businesses, the great honest businesses actually does takes a lot of time to make it profitable. And those businesses that are as simple as opening a store and selling it for a higher price, they're easier to be profitable at, but they're not as
Are they?
amazing of businesses. No,
Okay,
simple,
yeah.
simple,
I wouldn't
not as
know.
easy.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
That's amazing. And since we only have 45 minutes for the podcast and we're nearing the end, do you have any last message to just the general public? Anything you want to say to them? Maybe philosophies.
I'm going to go back to saying I would focus on your routine, because there's going to be times that you're not going to feel like doing whatever it is that you're doing, although at first you might have been passionate. The other thing I've noticed as you get older, John, you don't have the same maybe energy that you did when you were younger. And also, what I've noticed is the older you get, you're not as resilient towards stuff that come up that are outside of your control. Yet, if you can put together a routine, then whatever it is that happens that morning when you wake up that might trip you up, if I can use that word, or might upset you, it doesn't matter. And I know people don't like what I'm about to say next. I've had people argue with me on this, but if you kind of act like a robot, oh, people don't like that, right? When I've shared that with people that have trouble getting motivated and they say, "What do I do?" And as soon as I say a robot, they go, "I'm not a robot. I don't want to act like," fine, then solve your own problem. So my answer is you're not always going to feel like doing what you need to do. Yet if you have a to-do list and you are very uh, routined on it, uh, then it really doesn't matter what happened the day before, the morning before. You could have gotten into an argument with your wife, or your kids might have been difficult to deal with that morning as you're getting them off to school. Yet you don't let it ruin your entire day. It's called maturity. Right, John?
Yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, I don't think most people notice that. Why would you spend half of your day thinking about something that upsets you? You're basically paying it for it being annoying. So that's dumb. You know,
That's right.
why not just move on and continue with what you are doing?
That's right. Very well said, John.
And yeah, on the point of to do list, yeah, I have mine here. I like
That's beautiful. I love it.
I like writing it on paper. And the red
I do
lines
too.
on paper, I write it myself because if I write it myself, I feel like, yeah, if I wrote a task here and I didn't complete it, then I'm basically making myself look like a fool because I'm not completing it.
Yeah, I wrote one on a paper. I got the
But I,
training paper that's here. I folded it. I do the same thing,
oh
man.
man,
Yeah. I like making it on here and I write it down. Yeah.
that's amazing.
That's awesome.
I have like four index cards here, and by the end of the day, if I want the day to be successful, I need to at least fill this up back to back, four index card, and complete all of the task. If I wasn't able to do so, then it's a failure of a day for me.
Thank you. Glad that you use that word. You use success and you use failure. I love that you said that because it ties to that question. You're not always going to accomplish what you want to
Yeah.
accomplish. Yet, if you were able to get things off of your to do list, you did succeed, as you put it. You won. I'm not concerned about the results. I'm going to be activity oriented because the results will happen as long as I continue the activity over and over and over and over again. I deal with a lot of people in the Philippines where you're from that are in the farming background. And so I knew that you guys are at a 12-hour difference. And whenever I have Zoom meetings with them, it might sometimes be they'll say, let's do something at 7 a.m. their time. And I'm like, okay, I can handle 7 p.m. And I'll be on. And we do talk a lot about sowing seeds. And just like you said, you're not going to consider yourself a failure if you got things off of your list. I think that wraps everything up, doesn't it, John?
Yes, it does. And yeah, as on your point, you should feel successful if you had done your task for that day.
That's
Yeah,
right.
and before we end this, I have a favorite phrase. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's from Mark Cohelon's book. I forget the title. It's Maktub, basically meaning it is written. So basically, God has written your day before you even began it. So, what I like to ask
Like,
myself before I do something that is unproductive, does God think of me who is someone who is a slob, who is lazy, that I will just spend my whole day playing bad games or doing this stupid stuff? Or does God love me enough to write that I actually made this day very successful?
I like that. Yeah. And by the way, that's also a philosophy because really there are two philosophies. I'm sure there's more. I'll get to this. Well, no, I'm going to say there's two philosophies with our view towards God. We could say it's all based on what I do and the work that I do, and that's okay. I'm not saying right or wrong. That's one philosophy. The other is saying that God is in control and he is sovereign and everything that happens happened as a result of what he wanted to have happen. So
That is amazing. And if you do you want to say anything to the viewers, maybe where they can find you before we end this podcast?
probably LinkedIn would be good. They can find me Reagan Rodriguez, comma Futurist. You'll find me. You could go to worthyfutures.com. You can fill out your contact info on the website and it'll come to me via email.
I'm gonna have the links in here. I'm gonna have Reagan's
Thank you.
website here as well. I'm gonna make it cover all my screen so that people can see it. And again, Reagan, thank you for going into the show and sharing your amazing philosophies and the way you do business.
You're quite welcome, John.
That's all for today's episode of the New World Podcast. We have explored some fascinating topics with our amazing guests, shedding light on the upcoming New World. If you enjoyed today's episode and today's discussion and want to stay updated the future episodes, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, to the podcast. And if you found value on what we have discussed, please consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Remember, if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, or if you are interested in being a guest in the future, please feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn or email me at john.paul@aicinix.com and add New World Podcast, all capital, in the subject line so I can see it. I always love hearing from our listeners. And don't forget to check out our amazing guests. You can find more information about them by the contact details we provided earlier. Again, thank you for tuning in on the New World Podcast. I know your time is very important and I try to always make the next episode better than the last. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, keep innovating. This is John Paul Flores signing off from the New World Podcast.